that they found out that in fact marijuana doesn't just give you the munchies and fight AIDS that way. It actually fights the virus. It messes with one of the stages where the virus, HIV virus, replicates itself. But that wasn't actually the first medical thing I got involved with. The first medical thing I got involved with was a drug to stop hard drugs, and it's from another plant. That's the plant there. Back in the 70s, there was kind of two schools of thought in Normal, right? There was the decrim people and the legalization people. And they used to argue. It was like churchmen in the Middle Ages arguing these fine points of decrim versus legalization. Well, in Holland, they actually had a public health policy of separating marijuana from hard drugs. They had coffee shops, and they would allow you to run a coffee shop and sell marijuana as long as there was no cocaine or heroin in the coffee shop. And they would send people in every so often to find out if you had heroin or cocaine. So this was a health policy, and they amended the Opium Act, I think in 1976 or something like that. And it was the first harm reduction policy. It was even before needle exchange. Needle exchange is the second harm reduction policy. It doesn't really come along until 1980, and it's also in Holland, and it was to stop the spread of hepatitis C. This is before they knew about AIDS. And funny thing, they had a much, much lower incidence of AIDS among drug users in Holland because they put harm reduction, needle exchange into effect as policy before the AIDS virus really got, settled in the addict population. So we had a little thing in this country that really, really screwed us up. We had a nice president. He was for legalizing pot. His name was Jimmy Carter. And people got to be mad at Jimmy Carter because of something called paraquat. They couldn't understand why he would let the DEA, put paraquat on marijuana and poison people. And what was in reality happening is the DEA is a rogue agency. They do what they want. Right now they're dragging Obama kicking and screaming into a war on medical marijuana in California. And a bunch of people will not vote for Obama. But let me tell you, every time Republicans get in, they're 10 times worse than the Democrats. That's just a little aside, because I'm talking now about Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan and Just Say No. You remember them? Nancy Reagan? Well, they got in and they were, with the most reactionary element. And basically the people who got into control of the White House wouldn't talk to Normal. Normal before, had access to the White House under Jimmy Carter. All of a sudden they lost their access. If you even considered any form of harm reduction or legalization, you were out in the cold. So they actually wanted to mix up, to confuse hard drugs and marijuana in order to prove that marijuana was really bad. Because then, as now, primarily, as you saw just with the guy that was up here before, where the next day they arrested the crack people and they just knocked on their door, but they brought a SWAT squad in with machine guns because he had marijuana. The real thing that's driving the drug war in this country is marijuana. Once they found out they could piss test for it, which was also around the time of Jimmy Carter, there was no way they were ever going to let go of marijuana prohibition. And right now in this country, I know there's people from Leap here. In fact, he's talking next. I hope he doesn't take offense, but I am of the opinion there are entirely too many police in this country. We just have too many cops standing around with nothing to do. So what do? They arrest people for marijuana because it's something to do. You can make people piss in a bottle and find out they smoked marijuana last month. Arrest them! Okay, so what we decided to do and this was in December of 1980 after Reagan was elected, before he got sworn in, was to start developing another plant medicine to take the hard drugs out of the marijuana scene. See, we couldn't get the government to allow us to separate marijuana and hard drugs. They'd already started to crack down on pot shops. They had a lot of storefronts where, you know, apparently nothing much was happening, but they were really selling weed there. And people are in the impression in New York that if you didn't sell coke at your weed shop, your weed spot, that you wouldn't get busted. And this was true for a long time. In fact, later they did a study and they found that only 1% of when they had the big crackdown and got rid of all the weed spots, only 1% had cocaine. Because, you know, this unspoken agreement, right, that people wouldn't use marijuana to introduce people to cocaine. So we said we can't get them to separate marijuana and hard drugs, so we'll take the hard drugs out of the marijuana. And what we had was we had a drug from Africa. It was a plant. And now we're going to run this thing from Law and Order Special Victims Unit. I think I can turn it on here. Do you have a way I can turn this on?
Just click it.
Click it?
Yep.
Just click it.
Yep.
What's important is they need this kid who's puking as a witness. And he has to testify against the guy who's supplying him with heroin. He doesn't really want to turn in the guy who's supplying him with heroin as long as he's going to need more heroin tomorrow. But they're doing a murder investigation.
There are two kinds of parents: those who will do anything for their children and those who will pay any amount to have someone else do it for them. I read Enzo's file. His parents are art dealers. They spend most of their time in Europe. They paid more than $1 million to park Enzo at ASP.
What do we do?
Send him to rehab. There's methadone now, or it's back to heroin.
If I were in his shoes, they'd probably get high too.
He doesn't want to get high. He wants to avoid the pain of withdrawal. If he doesn't make it through rehab, he'll just go back to heroin and keep using it until it kills him.
So methadone's his only option?
There is one other option, ibogaine hydrochloride. It's been remarkably successful in treating opiate addiction. Within 24 hours, he'd lose his craving for heroin without any withdrawals.
So what's the catch? Crazy side effects?
The risks are minimal. Fewer die from ibogaine than methadone. Clinics around the world use it to treat heroin addiction. Imagine no more ODs, no more HIV from dirty needles.
So, let's do it.
I can't. The drug is illegal here.
It can cure heroin addiction in 24 hours and it's illegal.
Because the patent expired, no drug companies can make a profit off it. No one will pay for ibogaine to go through FDA trials.
The pharmaceutical industry can make more money treating addicts with less effective drugs. What a bunch of crap.
Speaking of that, look what just walked in.
You know, this is what I call real dedication. You're released from the can, you don't shower and shave, and you come right here.
What are you doing here?
I've come to take Enzo back to ASP.
You're not taking that boy anywhere.
When Enzo's parents enrolled him, they made me his legal guardian, and as his guardian, I know what's best for him.
What's best for him is real rehab, not your narcissistic schemes.
Don't worry, Dr. Wong. He'll get all the TLC he needs. Now, as his guardian, I will ask you to leave.
So you see, the psychiatrist from ASP, which means a sheltered place, is boffing the 14-year-old girls and giving the boys heroin.
As if he really cares about him.
Enzo is his stay out of jail card. I wouldn't be surprised if gold kept him high. Anything to keep him from testifying.
What do you think the chances are of him getting clean?
With gold playing the puppet master, slim to none. Unless someone cuts